Hi, my name is Ilya Burkov, team leader at the West LA Graduate Campus Tech Support at Pepperdine University. In the next few minutes, I'd like to give you a brief overview of Google Sites. In order to navigate to Google Sites, one must first go to Google. So if we go to google.com, in the address bar at the top, we should see a familiar looking Google page. Then, we can log in by clicking Sign In on the top right. What we do next is we enter in our network ID at pepperdine.edu and then our WaveNet password. And we'll click Sign In. And what you're going to see is CAS, which should be pretty familiar for most of you. This is what you see when you log into courses, or Sakai as we call it, or if you log into WaveNet. So once you enter in your login on the left, click Login. Once you're ready to pick your tool, go to the Apps button with the 9 squares and go to Google Sites. And what you're going to see is a page with all of the sites that you have either created or had shared with you. So you may have a parse study page very similar to this one. That's going to be created by somebody in the ELAB program, either a professor or a combination of folks in the ELAB program. And so basically there's going to be a page similar to this one. And if you navigate to it by going to the link, which should be emailed to you or however it gets to you, maybe it's on courses. You see on the left there's a page here called Links to C12 Student Google Sites. Okay, so if you click on the link, you'll see some of the people in cohort 12. Awesome. And you'll see people commenting with links to their site. And so if I pick a random person, how about Justin over here? If I click on Justin's link here, some of the files that have been shared. Mind you, I don't have the ability to comment, and that's because I haven't been given permission to comment by Justin on this site. It's one of the common issues with Google in that there are permissions. And if you don't give somebody an explicit permission, they won't be able to either view or edit what you're looking at. I'm going to go over that shortly. For now, let's close Justin's site. And just glean the takeaway that there may be the need for you to comment a link to your site, which is going to be the end result after you are done watching this video. Now, when you go to the main Google Sites page, you'll notice there aren't that many pages here. And so what we're going to do now is create our first Google site. So on the left here, you see a white and red Create button. Let's go ahead and click that. So when you begin creating your first Google site, you'll notice it asks you if you have a template. Unless you want to be adventurous and navigate through several templates, there are different looks of sites. For now, let's just keep it at a blank template. And let's call it Ilya's sample Google site. All right. And I'm going to actually change the location. I have the ability to change the link to any page I make or any site that I make. And so I can actually call this Ilya G site. Let's get rid of the underscore. Ilya G site. So if all goes well with this video, you guys should be able to go to https://sites.google.com/a/pepperdine.edu/IlyaGsite. Now, if you want, you can also add a theme. Add a little bit of color, add a little bit of vibrancy to your site. Why not? Let's make it school related. That's fine. And if you have more options, you can add a description. And you can add categories. That's helpful if people want to search for your site. Call it learning. So once you're ready, click the red Create button and just wait. Shortly, it's going to create your first Google site. And you'll notice it's themed. I guess this is a green board from a school. That's great. So you'll notice before that the first page you begin in is the home page. here it is. Here's your home page. And if you wanted to see the breakdown of the site, graphical breakdown, hierarchical breakdown, here's the sitemap. Let's go back to the home page. Okay, so now you guys know how to navigate between different pages. It's on the left-hand side. And you guys know where the content for your actual page is. It's going to be in the middle of your screen. Go to the Edit Page button. It looks like a little pencil. And you should see the title of your page. So let's call it Ilya's Home. And add some sort of content. There you go. Now, remember I mentioned where it said when it was last updated. This is where the actual content manipulation settings are. So if I want to make this text bigger, I change the font size. If I wanted to bold something, I select it, bold it. This is called what you see is what you get, this kind of editing. And so if you wanted to add or change the font size or add a background. Okay, let's not do that. That doesn't look very good. Let's take that background off. Okay, so before I move on, this is very similar to Google Docs and how the editing works there. I'm not going to go into too much detail more than I've already gone over. But I do want you guys to look at a few different things here. First, the Help dropdown. Any help you might need. The Layout dropdown changes how this page looks. You can split it into 2 or 3 or go back to 1 because I don't know why you'd want to split a page into 2 or 3. You can add a table, very similar to like Excel or in Word, adding a table through Word. You can change formatting like in Word. You can do different headings. You can associate different headings with different font sizes. And the most important thing that you can do, the Insert dropdown. Very powerful because this is how you can integrate Google Sites with other aspects of Google. You can basically insert content into your page. Now, mind you, you may have noticed I just called this a page. So for the purposes of this session, for this video, I'm going to differentiate. This is a page. It is your home page. This whole thing is a website. So keep that in mind. Some people use them synonymously. And for this session, I will not. Okay, so enough talk. We've made our changes. Drafts are saved, but they're not actually going to reflect on the page until you click Save, the blue button on the top right. So go ahead and save your page. And now, if everything went well and it's saved correctly, you should see what it's going to look like for people that are going to be visiting your site. Now, mind you, we haven't shared it with anybody yet, which I'm going to go over in a minute. But when you do share this with people, they're going to be able to see exactly what you see at this moment in time. Okay, so before I get into sharing, I want you guys to notice the gear on the top right. And this is where you guys can do manipulations of the pages you're on or the site you're on as a whole. There's a few different levels of breakdown here. The first is the page actions. Page actions mean, hey, whatever you're going to do, it only does it on the page you're on right now. And so the page that you're on has a revision history. You can go back in time. If you click on it, it'll show you what the page looked like before you made any changes. So if you go to version 2, this is the change that I made. If you go to version 1, hey, there's going to be nothing here because, hey, I just made a change and there wasn't anything on the home page when I began. So you can go back in time and revert to changes if you want, just like on Google Docs. You can subscribe to page changes. If you have access to somebody's page, you should be able to subscribe to page changes. That way you get emailed whenever somebody makes a change on the page you're interested in subscribing to. There are, of course, settings, which you can change for people. You can print a page if you want. This is what it would look like if you printed it. And moving forward, You can copy it, make duplicates of a page. And this is the important one for you guys. This is what it would look like if you shared this website or this page with somebody who has view access. That means they can only see your pages, they can't change anything on them. So if you go to Page Actions, Preview Pages Viewer, this is what it would look like to them. See, it's on the yellow here. That means you're looking at it like someone else would. Now, moving forward, you can change templates on pages if you wanted to. You can change what kind of page it is. By doing what I just did, I allowed the page to have comments. I made it into a web page. So that's fine. People can comment on my site when they visit it. And finally, you have one last breakdown in the gear in the top right under Actions. That's called an action button. You can see site actions. And so instead of being subscribed when somebody makes a change to the page, you can be subscribed when somebody makes a page to anything on the site. And so that way you get emailed, hey, there's an update on the site. I'd like to know about it. Please email me about it. So you just click it and that reflects on the top. Well, let's unsubscribe for the time being. If you want to make changes to the site as a whole, you can go to Edit Site Layout and you can change how this looks, what you see. You can change the width of the site, or you can get rid of the header. See, the top part just disappeared. And basically, I'm going to re-enable that and move forward. Now, before I get into sharing, there's one last thing you need to see, and that's Manage Site. Manage Site is pretty important because this is where you can change the name of the site, or the description of the site, or the site you start on, which is the home page. It's called the landing page in this case. This is where you can make a copy of your site, save it as a template. So if you wanted to, the way you've made your website, you can do it again when you make a new website. It'll show up as a template. You can delete a page. You can do analytics, so you can tell who's using your site, how many people are visiting it, when, how, what countries they're from, and so on and so forth. There are many, many, many different things you can do with managing your site, which are beyond the scope of this video. But one important thing is you can see the recent activity, what you edited, what you did when. And so if you have more than one person editing a page or a site, you can see what they did and when. But let's move back to our home page and move forward. First, I'm going to go over sharing before I go into creating pages. And after we go through creating our first page and integrating it with Google, that should wrap up our overview of Google Sites. So first, sharing. In blue on the top right, if you click on share, you're going to see in the center of the page the link to your page. Remember Ilya G site. There it is. Below that, you're going to see who has access to your page and what kind of access they have. By default, we allow anybody at Pepperdine to find your page and edit it. That means anybody can change what's on your site. You may not want that. You may want only people to view. So there are a few different ways you can do this, and they're pretty self-explanatory. Anybody on the web can find it, and they don't need a Google account or sign in. Anybody with the link can view your site, and they don't need to sign in. But they can't search for it. They have to have the link. Anybody at Pepperdine can search for your page and access it, or edit it as it was originally. That's by default what we have. Anybody at Pepperdine with the link, so they can't search for it, but they can access it, and they usually can view it instead of being able to change things. Or if you want to have very granular control about who has access to what, you can share it with specific people. So for the time being, I'm going to keep it as it was. Anybody at Pepperdine can find and access your page. But you may want it that anybody at Pepperdine with the link can access it. And I'm going to change it from edit to view because I want anybody at Pepperdine. I'm not hiding anything on this sample Google site, But I don't want you guys changing anything. I just want you to see my site. So I'm going to keep it on can view instead of can edit. Then I'm going to save this. What this means is, hey, give this link to anybody in your cohort. They're going to see your site. And so we can test this. Let's go back. And let's go to the Actions button and view it as a viewer. And this is what they would see. Now, let's move back. Close this tab here. And do something a little bit different. Because this is one of the big issues I mentioned in the beginning of the session about permissions. Everybody has to have specific implied permissions, or they're not going to see or be able to do something. So, in my other video, I created a Google group with some of my colleagues within the group. So basically, I wouldn't have to add every person to this site. I wouldn't have to go like this. This is one of our colleagues in IT. This is another one of our colleagues in IT. This is a third colleague within IT. I don't want to add every single person to the cohort to this site. But I can. I mean, let's say the cohort's only 10 people. I can add them all here. I just need a list of their emails, which is perfectly fine. I can do that. Or if you watch my other Google Groups video, I can make a group with it. And if I make a group with it, I shouldn't need to add them one by one. I can just make a group. Maybe a professor can make a group. Somebody can make a group with every person in the cohort in the group, so you don't have to add it. And then I would just add the group. Here's the link to the group that I made. It's a test group for WAIT, and I'm going to allow them to edit instead of view. And I'm not going to notify them. I will not notify them. I don't want to spam their inboxes. So it's warning you that they won't know that you've added them. That's perfectly fine. Let's move forward. That's it. I've added my group that has edit access, but by default, anybody at Pepperdine can only view my page. Perfect. So what I want to do next is create my first page. And so I'm going to go on the top right. It's the only icon we haven't gone over yet. It's the little piece of paper with the little plus. We're going to create our first page. And then we're going to name it. We're going to call it Idea Synthesis. Hopefully I spelled synthesis correctly. That's fine. I shouldn't need to change anything else. I'm going to keep it as a web page. I'm not going to change it so it's under something else. That's perfectly fine. You can have granular control over what page is under which category. I can make a category called Idea Synthesis and make entries under it. Entry 1, Entry 2, Entry 3. I could do that and I would put it under something else. But I'm not doing that at the moment. I'm just going to keep it in the top. When I'm ready, I'm going to create the page. And that is how easy it is to create my first Google site web page. Here's my idea synthesis. Here's the name of the page. And over here is the content. So I'm going to say, welcome to my idea synthesis page. See below. Okay, why do I want to type see below? Very good question, and it's very simple. Because instead of pasting in the idea synthesis into here, I can do one of two things. I could add the file. I'm not going to put in idea synthesis since I've never written one, but I do have a Google Drive test, and I can add a file in here if I wanted to. And if I do that, here it is. I have a Google Drive test. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that because I want a more dynamic way to have my content on my pages. So how do I do that? Remember I mentioned that Google is very powerful to integrate all their tools together. So if I made a Google Drive document, I can actually insert it into this web page. And anytime I make a change on the page, on the Google Drive, on the Google Doc, it's going to reflect here. Now I'm not going to go into specific detail about Google Docs. That is another session entirely. But what I will do is show you what I mean by adding dynamic content. So here's what I mean. Remember the insert dropdown I mentioned? Here it is. All right. Remember I mentioned Google Drive under Google on the right side? Well, look, I can point it to any Google Drive document, drawing, folder, form, image, presentation, spreadsheet, or video. So why don't I go to Document? Now I have a lot of documents. I don't know about you guys. I have a lot. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to look for an idea synthesis. And look, I have one. Awesome. So I selected the idea synthesis. That's all I did. All I did was point it to a Google file. I'm going to do that again. I can point it to one of these, but these are all IT related things. You probably don't want to see that. But I can point it to something. I can search for it. I can point it to an idea synthesis document. All right, awesome. So it's going to ask me if I want a border, if I want a title. You know what? I'm going to get rid of the title. I'm going to keep the border though, and I'm not going to touch the height and width. Unless you're an expert user, you can change how big the preview is. You might not want to do that, but just keep it. Usually it's good how it is. When you're ready to insert the dynamic content, click Save. And that's it. You've added your first piece of dynamic content. This is a Google document. Awesome. So why isn't it showing anything? Because you haven't saved yet and you're in an editing mode. You're not in a preview mode. So when you're ready, save it. Note the draft is saved, so even if you don't save it yet, you can always come back to it later. Go ahead and save it. And you notice here is an idea synthesis. That's it. So what does this mean in terms of dynamic content? What it means is, pay close attention here to what it looks like. I'm going to open it here under Open Idea Synthesis. Then I'm going to be able to open the official document. What I can do now is I can take this and make it bold or make the text bigger. And this will reflect in my site. Now mind you, this idea synthesis isn't mine, it's view only, so I can't actually do this. But if you're aware of how Google Drive and Google Docs works, you should be able to manipulate this file. And once you exit out of it and reload your page, any changes are going to reflect here. So this way, what I mean by dynamic content is you do it once, you add it in, and hey, any changes you make, any changes your group makes, it's going to reflect here too. Awesome. So what I'd like to do next is just test the access that I have in place for this page. And so if you remember, I shared this with my group. That means anybody within my group should be able to access my page. But remember, I mentioned Google has different ideas of permission. What I mean by that is this document may not have the permission for my people, my users that I shared with, to see the file, this document here. So let's test it. What I'm going to do is bring over a window here with one of my other accounts. And I'm going to go to google.com. I'm already on google.com. I'm going to go to the apps. I'm going to go to Google Sites. It's under More in this case. Even more. Let's look for Google Sites. There it is. Go to Google Sites. Okay, so it looks like we don't have the Google site listed here. So let's go back here. Let's go to your Manage Your Site. Everything seems to be fine here. So let's exit out of it. We can go to Sharing and Permissions. Everything seems to be fine here. Let's take this link. Give me 1 second, guys. Move this around. And then let's navigate with my other account to my Google site. And there you go. I can comment. I have the ability to comment because I gave everybody in this group edit access. They're able to leave comments. That gets rid of the first issue we had on the C12 Parse Study site. Not everybody was added specifically to edit the page, so they can't edit or add comments. Let's look at the idea synthesis. Okay, so here's the second issue. This document that I made does not have the permission to be seen. As you see here, this is a problem. So how do we resolve the problem? What we're going to do is go back to our idea synthesis, and we're going to edit the page. And we're going to delete this inserted Google Doc. And we're going to add another one. I'm going to go to Drive, I'm going to Document. And then we're going to type in idea, and then we're going to look at another idea synthesis document. And hopefully this is one I actually own. Same thing we did before, it's just this is my own document. Once I save, I should be able to see some sort of idea synthesis. So let me try to open this one up. This one is also view only. Okay, so these are all idea synthesis documents that are shared with me. I'm not going to be able to set permissions on them. I don't have the right to. They're not mine. So we're going to try a third one. Insert a document. And we're going to do Team 1's idea synthesis. And we're going to get rid of the title, just like we did before. We're going to save. All right, this looks like one of mine. So if we open up the idea synthesis, if need be, you'll notice I have the rights to manipulate this exactly how I want. This is wonderful. Now, before we continue, let's test and see if my other account can access this. Here it is. Let's go back to the home page. Go back to the idea synthesis. I still don't have permission, which is expected. So let's try to check the permissions for this idea synthesis. Let's go ahead and go to share. Okay, so it makes sense why it doesn't work. It's only shared with anybody at Pepperdine with the link to view. So if we go to advanced, we change this to anybody with the link can view with no sign-in required. Let's go ahead and save this and be done with it. Let's go back. Let's go back to the home page. Let's go back to the idea synthesis page. And you should see the file in question, the idea synthesis. So it's very clear now that permissions are a big part of Google Sites. And when you create your site, you need to share it with the people who are going to be using your Google site. But at the same time, you also need to share any dynamic content. And so, what I want to show you guys is one last thing that's on Google Drive in particular. I'd like to show you one thing that can save you a headache, because you're probably going to be creating multiple documents. And it's very simple. Instead of sharing every document separately by going to File, Share, and clicking on each document separately, what we can do is go to drive.google.com, or you can go to the Apps button and go to Drive on any Google page. And you can go to an example file. Here it is. Here's the idea synthesis. And you'll notice, instead of sharing this file, what we can do is we can share the folder. And so if you create a folder with all your Google documents that are going to be for your dynamic content, you can share that. So if you go to share, go over here, you can share this folder. I don't think you need to granularly share it with only a few people. It's not necessary. You can share it with anybody with the link, and they can view it. And so if you do it this way, any document within this folder will automatically pop up here with no permission issues. So we've gone over a few things. We've gone over how to create a site, how to edit pages, how to manage the site, how to edit content, how to add content, and how to manipulate content. We've gone over the integration with Google Drive. we've gone over how to create a dynamic page instead of a static page where you add files one by one. Each time you make a change, you're going to have to add it again. There's no point in doing that. We've gone over sharing of permissions for the site itself. We've gone over using Google Groups to do it. And we've gone over view and edit permissions. Now, in IT, we recommend that you do anybody at Pepperdine can view it, but any specific permissions that you want to add outside of that, you can add to a group. If you want to know more about groups, you can look at the Google site, the Google Groups training. And we've finally gone over commenting. And so you've noticed that now, on my other account, pretend this is someone else, I can see the page, I can comment on any pages, and I can see the content down here. Here it is. The one thing that I didn't go over with you guys is what a blog is. If you guys don't know what a blog is, basically like a journal. And you can create a blog page. So before I go, I'd like to show you this because it may be part of your Google site. So if we go back to Google site and then go to my G site, which by the way you guys should be able to view at any time, just not edit but view, and create a new page. Remember the pencil. I'm sorry, the paper with the plus. I can create a blog. Just call it blog. And the way you differentiate between a web page and a blog is the template. Instead of picking a web page, you can make an announcements. That's the name of the template for blogs. And there are others, but let's focus on these two for this session. When you click create, you now have a blog. And the way it works is simple. Think of it as a journal entry is a post. So make a new post, and then add your content. Entry 1, first blog made. Yay. And then go ahead, and when you're done, save it. That's it. And if you want to see what it would look like to a viewer, preview the page. This is what they would see. The second way you guys can get help is if you call our help desk, which is available 24/7, 365 days a year. The phone number is 1-866-767-8623. Toll free in the United States.